I'm going to start by saying that this talk definitely ends on a high note. And I wanted to bring that up because partway through you might be going, I hope we end on a high note. The title of the talk is Unintended Consequences. And the idea behind this is that the universe only has one answer. The universe always says yes. So what happens in our experience, what the universe says yes to, is always dependent upon what we put into our intention. What we ask of the universe, what we demand of the universe. Because the answer is always going to be yes. And if we ask a question that we don't want to get a yes to, then we're probably not going to get the experience that we want. And it's a law. It always works. Sometimes it works instantly. Sometimes it takes a long time to unfold for us to understand how it's working. Everybody familiar with the law of gravity? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much always working. There are really no exceptions. Even out in space where we're in free fall, outside of the sphere of Earth's gravity, there's still gravity, still always falling towards something, just don't happen to feel it. Now, if somebody has an experience, well, let's say, I don't know, a crystal goblet and a tile floor. Now, you know where that can lead. So that might not be the happiest experience of gravity, but blaming gravity for what happened is just, there's no success or happiness in it. So the universe is always going to say yes. So we have the authority to make whatever demand or request or intention that we have with the universe. We have that authority. We are able to create that intentional demand upon the law in whatever way we want. And simultaneously, we have the accountability that whatever it is that's showing up in our lives as a direct or indirect result of what it was that we were looking for, that's also ours. There's no blame. There's no punishment. There's no favor or petition that we have to the law. Oh, please work for me this time. I promise I'll be good. It's like, you can, whatever it is that you think of as being good, you get to start by doing that. Because the universe will respond by saying yes. And if you're participating in whatever you think of as being good, the universe will continue to support that. And for people who are cutting corners, people who are trying to skate by and get away with it, often it works for a while. And eventually it comes back around, and the universe says yes to whatever the deceit, dishonesty, cutting corners happen to be, and the result is something that we don't want to experience. You're not in control of the details. You're the architect of the overall experience. You are the architect of your life. You get to decide what it is that you're going to build. And in the same way that an architect can design a beautiful house, I have a wonderful idea for a house. It's on the crest of a hill, under the trees, with the setting and the whatever, and the view of the ocean, and whatever it happens to be. The architect can create that intention for the house. And if the architect builds the house in Leilani Estates on the big island of Hawaii, and the earth opens up because it's a volcano, and lava starts spewing into the property, well, that's not probably what they wanted. That wasn't somebody's plan or intention. But you know what? If you're going to build the house on a volcano, you got to at least be open to that sort of a possibility. Now, I'm not going to blame the people who are living on the Big Island, because it's a possibility and they made a choice to do that. And it's been okay up until now. There's the possibility of things not going exactly the way that we had in mind, the way that we specified or intended. What we get to do is set an intention for the tone, the timbre, the texture of the experience we want to have. When we try and tell God how to do it, exactly how the pieces need to fit together, I want to have a perfect, wonderful, loving relationship. And it's got to be with her, and it's got to be starting Saturday, and it's got to go this way and look that way. What we're trying to do is control the situation and take the free will that everybody else has and channel it into what it is that we want. And that part doesn't work. from a spiritual perspective. Some people have found that that sort of behavior works really well out in the world. They get away with it for a while. So for all of these intentions that we have, there are the intended results or consequences, and there can also be unintended consequences. When somebody does a prayer because they're tired of their job and they don't want to have that job anymore. And some of you know where we're going with this. Or, just even in our language, when it's not even a prayer, somebody saying, I want to get out of this job, or something's a pain in the neck, or whatever. It can't be a surprise when the job goes away. It shouldn't be a surprise when there's a visit to the chiropractor that's required. So we get to watch the intentions that we're setting all the time, because the universe is always saying yes. So if somebody is, having distress with their digestion, and they say, my stomach is killing me, you probably want to be careful about repeating that affirmation, because positive, powerful, affirmative prayers work on the same principle and the same law as worry and complaint. It's whether we're turned towards the positive and the intentionality of what we want to be creating in our lives, or if we're looking at what we don't want to be creating in our lives. The universe doesn't discern. The universe doesn't care. So all prayer has consequences. When the intention is for there to be a green light, as Breen was talking about, the universe is okay with that. There'll be a green. You know what? The light is green probably about half the time. So the prayer actually was for the light to be green when Breen was there. And the universe doesn't care. That 50-50 doesn't make any difference. It's perfectly okay for that to be in Breen's experience. Now, praying for somebody else to have red lights can work, except Breen would wind up having a lot of red lights himself at very inopportune moments. And it's not because there's some sort of a monkey's paw. This is a story that Reverend David introduced me to. And I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the monkey's paw. There's no trickery involved in this. The story of the monkey's paw is that there was a mummified monkey's paw, and the legend was that when somebody came into possession of it, they could make 3 wishes that would be granted. And somebody got the monkey's paw and said, they wish for $200. Just a very casual wish. And the next day, somebody came and visited in the middle of the day and said there was a terrible accident at your son's workplace, and he was killed. And we're so sorry, it wasn't our fault, but to help compensate you, we're going to give you $200. And of course, mom is all distraught, because that's horrible. That's not what they were wishing for. Prays for her son, or sets the wish for her son to come back, and of course he came back, but he was still mangled from the wreckage, and they had to use the 3rd wish to let him go back to not be with them anymore. That's the monkey's paw story. And I told you this was going to go a little low here. This is a portion of the low part. And I tell you that story because that is not how the universe works. We are not punished for asking for things. There's not some other shoe to drop. It's the universe of oneness. There's only one shoe. Okay? We're not going to have the other shoe to drop. So what we're doing when we set an intention, when we're doing a prayer, is we are focused on the experience that we want to have. And the more clear we can be on approaching that from what Emma Curtis Hopkins called the high watch, of the idea of highest and best unfolding for everybody, the more likely it is that that prayer is going to be uplifting for all of us. The other thing that sometimes people get concerned about, if they're considering a job or there's a financial opportunity, is they think, oh, well, if I pray for this job, then there might be an even better job that I'm going to miss. If I say yes to this marriage proposal, there might be an even better person who's coming along later, or whatever it happens to be. So the prayer in that case is for this good to be unfolding, and it's really easy to just add on this or something better. Now, that can sound a little greedy. Oh, well, there's this good coming to me, but I want something better. If we're approaching it from a perspective of greed, of I want to be able to get as much as I can, then that's absolutely true. And that's why we can't necessarily tell the difference. Judge not. Is it good news or bad news? I mean, is this uplifting and highest and best for everybody? Or is this me demanding what I want for myself? If we approach it as this or something better, that I'm letting go of my attachment to this, and I'm getting much more into the tone and the texture and the feeling of what it is I want to be experiencing, I am opening myself up to all of that good, whatever that good is going to come out looking like. That's what we mean when we say this or something better. When we're trying to control the situation, when we're trying to micromanage the infinite will act like it's being micromanaged and give us little tiny things that we may or may not have wanted. So there are a bunch of stories that come up about this. My favorite one to tell along about this time of year is about, basically, I think the hero of Unintended Consequences was a fellow who wanted to be a world-class chemist. His name was Thomas Midgley Jr., lived about 100 years ago. And Thomas Midgley Jr., and his birthday is this week, which is why I like to talk about Thomas Midgley Jr. In the early 1900s, when internal combustion engines were relatively new and the automotive industry was just growing up, there was a horrible problem with the engines knocking. It's because there wasn't enough octane in the gasoline. So they needed to come up with something that would increase the octane in the gasoline. And Thomas Midgley Jr. got to work on the team that was fixing this problem. I think it was part of DuPont. And they came up with two possibilities. One is ethanol. Basically, you take corn, you distill it, and you add that to the gas. Increases the octane. That's fine. There were two problems with the ethanol answer. First of all, it was kind of expensive. And second of all, they couldn't patent distilling corn. That had been around for a while. So he spent all sorts of time figuring out what he could do to make this work. And he invented what they called ethyl. They put ethyl into the gasoline, and it increased the octane and got the knock to go away. Oh, they called it ethyl because the full name was tetraethyl lead, and everybody already at that point knew that lead was poisonous. So the idea of putting lead into gasoline had some people's attention. Is this really a safe thing to do? Well, Thomas Midgley Jr., ever the promoter, he just wanted his invention to be a success. They had a big press conference. There had been some people at the factory where they were making this stuff, which I think was in New Jersey, and there were people who had to be excused from work they were basically suffering from hallucinations and losing their minds. So that was in the news. So they had this news conference, and he's trying to convince everybody that this stuff is safe. So he takes this tetraethyl lead, and he splashes his hands around it for a while, and he sniffs it for a couple of minutes. He says, this is perfectly safe. And the reporters are all there, and they're writing down the story, and they go off and they publish that tetraethyl lead is actually safe. And Thomas Midgley Jr. went to Switzerland to be treated for 2 years for lead poisoning. Yeah, because it turned out there was a problem. Actually, anybody still use leaded gasoline? Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. It was outlawed in the 70s because it turns out it wasn't a good idea. All of the lead that got put into the atmosphere was the unintended consequence of wanting to be able to control the situation. Now, Thomas Midgley Jr. wasn't finished. He came back and he started working on another project, which was refrigeration. Because at that point, the refrigerant was ammonia and it was dangerous, and they needed something that was going to be safer, and he invented Freon. This guy is 2 for 2 on horrible things to do to the atmosphere to further his own career. So we can take a lesson from Thomas Midgley Jr. that when we're not able to set an intention and then say, this or something better, or highest and best for all involved, when we're trying to control it and push it through, there is the possibility that we're going to wind up with a house built on a volcano. There's another one that's going on currently, which is Roundup. I can explain to a fourth grader in 2 sentences why this isn't a good idea, but we're still discussing it. This is glyphosate, which is an insecticide, or it's a pesticide, an herbicide. So here's the 2-sentence description. So we got this magic chemical that we throw it on the ground, it kills all the plants. But we have these seeds that are immune to the poison. So we're going to put that stuff on the ground, we're going to plant these seeds, and then when they sprout, we're going to eat them. And the fourth graders would go, "You're kidding, right?" Or something better. So we're always have that possibility of being able to step into a new experience that's going to be in our lives. So I got two more stories. Here's a happy one for you. It's our friend Katie, and a lot of you have heard this story before. Katie was divorced, and she and her kids were living on their own, and she wanted to have a new relationship. She wanted to be married. She wanted to have a combined family, and she really wanted to feel that committed partnership that she was so much longing for. And so she set the intention. She was actually in her foundational class in New Thought, and she was she was very specific about the feeling that she wanted, the experience that she wanted to be having. And as she reported later, blow me over with a feather to find out it was going to be a woman. But she and Diane have been together for years now. They've been married. Their families have combined perfectly. She got exactly what it was that she wanted, even though she might not have described it that way. If she was trying to micromanage it, who knows how many relationships she might have gone through before she got to the one that she was looking for. This or something better, unfolding with love and ease for everybody who's involved. We call this the science of mind, or religious science is the teaching that we have, because we believe that there's a science to the way that the prayers work. The universe is always saying yes, so we get to be very specific in what we are inviting, what we are intending. So I've been doing some work recently with the scientific studies, because there have been people who, over the years, have taken on to prove how well scientific prayer, or how well affirmative prayer works. And there was a really good study that was done probably 10 or 12 years ago. And it's called the STEP study. And I'll describe it very briefly to you. It was done for patients who are going to be undergoing cardiac bypass. And apparently there's a really high incidence of complications with cardiac bypass. So this was the Mayo Clinic and 5 other really big hospitals that you've heard of that all got together. They put 1,600 patients into this study. It was a 2-year-long study. And they broke them up into 3 groups. There's a control group. There was a group that was prayed for every day and not told that they were being prayed for. And there was another group that got prayed for every day, and they were told they were being prayed for. And they had 3 groups of people, including a New Thought group, which was the Unity World Ministries that was doing this prayer. And at the end of the study, the last line in the study is, results are inconclusive, but we think this merits more research. And it turns out that almost every study ends that way when they're talking about the effectiveness of prayer. So I'll give you the results, and then I'll give you some additional background on it. Of the control group, 53% had complications after the surgery. Of the group that had remote intercessory prayer, that's the word they use, intercessory prayer, that was not told, they had a rate of 53% complications. And of the group that was prayed for and was told they were being prayed for, the rate of complications was 59%. Oh. Well, that's bad. That's more complications when they're being prayed for and they know they're being prayed for. Well, if you dig into the study, the people who were doing the prayer, they were all volunteers. They were not free to pray the way that they wanted to. They were told, you can do this, or you can't have any communication with the patients, you can't know anything about the follow-up with the patients, and whatever it is that you do, whatever prayer that you do, you simply need to end with this affirmative statement. A successful surgery free of complications. What word did they end on? Complications. And the universe always says yes. So they actually got exactly what they were praying for, in the form of the unintended consequence of complications. Well, who would do that? Well, nobody would do that intentionally. Nobody would do that on purpose. But it's really easy to slip into that. Listen to your language, listen to your self-talk as you go through the week, and see if you hear yourself claiming something that you don't want from time to time, or from moment to moment. And listen to other people. People who aren't thinking about what it is that they're intending and what it is that they want to be creating. Listen to the amount of complaining that you hear, which is people who are doing their best to identify the problem and celebrate it. And we're free to do that. We are always free to do that, but we don't have to. We are free to choose otherwise. We're free to open ourselves to whatever that new possibility is. So, whenever it is that you're doing a prayer, if it's for something small, like green lights, or something that you perceive to be big, like a job or a change in life experience, whatever it happens to be, you can always tack on highest and best with love and ease for me and all involved. Remember that one. Highest and best with love and ease for me and all involved. Because if you have an idea of how something is supposed to work, and you add on to the how that you've got in mind, first of all, it might nudge you back into what is it that I really want to be experiencing. So I want this or something better. Unfolding as highest and best with love and ease for me and all involved. That takes you to that higher place. That brings you up to the high watch that Emma Curtis Hopkins was talking about. And the universe is saying yes. The universe is always saying yes. It's not because you deserve a yes. You get a yes anyway. You deserve the best. You deserve the highest and best, unfolding with love and ease in everything that you're involved in. In whatever idea you have, that or something better. So open yourself up to that greatness. The gift is at hand. God's gift is at hand. It is being given to you, and all you have to do is say yes. You deserve it. I love you. So it is.